Welcome to the latest episode of our podcast series, Beyond Insights. And today we will discuss the power of feedback, nurturing candidate relationships. We are in conversation with Sandeep Mitra, co-founder and managing director, VBeyond Corporation. How does constructive feedback during hiring enhance the experience for all candidates, including those not chosen?
This entire process of feedback management, right? I mean, which cuts across in my mind two ways. One is the effective utilization of it for the talent community in terms of how a successful interviewee takes a look at it in terms of if you're successful or even if you're not. And both the cases, I believe feedback is required. And then the second major aspect is how do you make use of candidate feedback for the hiring company, right? I mean, how do you streamline your own processes in terms of taking feedback from the talent community and ensuring that the positive candidate experience continues to be there? So, so first off, to define constructive feedback to the talent community, right, to a person who's made it or a person who's not made it in that round of interview or discussion, I think my own definition is any feedback has to be empathetic in a listening mode, understanding of the candidate in terms of how the entire process went through, and then in an active listening mode, understanding the person, and then also giving the feedback what you have gathered from the interviewers, right? I mean, which typically in my mind, so it has to be authentic, it has to be real. At the same time, it has to be empathetic and compassionate and with a positive outcome outlook, right? I think from both the candidate and this thing. What is important is the timing of it in terms of how soon you come out with the feedback. Uh, in my own experience, I see not more than 25 to 30% of the cases have the feedback, right? So while one can understand in a volume hiring process, it's really difficult for the hiring companies also to come out with the feedback. But any mid to senior level positions and board level positions, CXO level positions, what we want to hire for, we always insist upon that feedback needs to go out. In spite of our best efforts, though, we still struggle at times. And as I told you, not more than 30% of the cases I do get to see. Though, in some form or the other, we do try to take that and then relate to the talent community as much as we can. So importance is paramount. How do you structure the feedback? It has to be little data driven. It has to be little factual driven rather than just empty inane statements coming out. You got to give examples of where the candidate did well and where the candidate did not do well, coming out with the clear cut answers being there, and then let the discussion flow. A lot of times I suggest that the discussion has to be the time which you spend on candidate feedback could be as much as what you do for mandate briefing. So yeah, so to that an extent, I believe there is a tremendous power out there for the company also to enhance their reputation in the talent market. uh, Positive candidate experiences is at multiple level, right, from the moment of truth to the feedback. But feedback as a tool to enhance reputation is tremendous, and I would urge upon all my clients, and including in our own HR team for all the. So we are a 500 people company. We hire at least between 50 to 100 people every year, and to that an extent, even we need to practice that, and we do practice that to the best possible extent.
How can companies give feedback that is useful and actionable for applicants?
The day of the interview, the moment of truth situation for the candidate, how that person is at that point in time, right? That impacts quite a bit. And a lot of times it could be from the candidate end or from the interviewer end or the company end, right? And to that an extent, what we suggest and advise. So first is when you take the debrief post the interview, and assuming you've had a discussion with the client before that, so you need to understand what the candidate went through during those couple of hours the person would have been there at the company or during the virtual interview or whatever the process might have been. At times, interviewers could be delayed. At times, interviews could be delayed for an interview. Were there any genuine reasons for that? Were they kept waiting at the visitors room? I mean, how did that entire process lay out, right? So that is very important. So once you understand the candidate purely from a candidate standpoint, the way I look at it is, and this is something which we advise our senior consultants in terms of when they lay out the feedback, right? Uh, it could be in a written form or it could be in a verbal form. And more often not, I typically suggest that we should get to talk to the candidate because that is the time when you get to really engage and then you really get to feel the candidate also, right? So that's important for the person who's receiving the feedback. If it is as factual and as fact based as it can be, it is always beneficial, right? So, for example, a candidate might not have managed the team size what the client would have been looking at, or let's say, for example, there's a particular side of, let's say you're hiring for a finance and accounts person, maybe the person was weak on the FP&A side rather than the core accounting side. So come out with those examples, right? In terms of while A, B, C, D was good, there was a little bit of a delta out there in terms of what could have been, where they felt there was a bit of a gap in terms of what the candidate they were looking at and how it came about. So that is important. Uh, and then, when at times you feel the candidate is good, he should have ideally made the cut. Maybe the interviewer could not get to gauge the person in that limited time that the interviewer might have had. Going through the entire process, you also ask the candidate that if you really believe you had such an off day because of ABCD external reasons, maybe someone was not well, someone was, and you had that in your back of your mind. So would you want to have one more quick round of a discussion? And we typically ask the candidate client also in case they are convinced that in case we are convinced that the person is really good and he should be provided with one more chance, maybe with the same interviewer or with the another interviewer. So we typically push the client to a certain extent and they try to accommodate that wherever they can. So in terms of strategy, as I would say, feedback strategies, I mean, be quantifiable, be, if on a scale of rating, maybe communication skills, maybe pushback skills, maybe a collaborative objection handling skills, maybe consulting skills, or, a lot of times what I see is in the mid to senior level, uh, the feedback what we get is not it could be on the hard skill side, which does come about, but more often than not, it's on the soft skill side, right? And there you need to ask those examples in terms of why did you feel probably the person was lacking on, say, an executive presence, right? I mean, how would the person react to an objection handling, or do you think the person has the ability to operate at a high level as well as at a low level, right? So things like that. So for what typically becomes important to our clients, whatever are their parameters, whatever are their cultural fabric, right? I mean, and maybe some other day we will talk about it, but a lot of times the cultural fitment probably becomes the bigger issue in terms of how a company looks at. So those feedback, what needs to go out to the candidate, should be done in a timely manner, should be as much as quantified as it can be. It has to be genuine, it has to be authentic, it has to be empathetic, as I was talking to you about, understanding the client candidate's perspective also. And then relay it back to the client also wherever it needs to be going out, right? And then, of course, being a exec search company and a hiring consulting company, we also believe that we give that feedback. Okay, fair enough that maybe this is not where it kind of worked out, but there are ABCD other companies where probably your kind of perspective, what you are or what you're talking about, might be greater fitment out there. And we shall be in touch and hopefully things work out. So positive candidate experience, right at the client end, at our end, both the ends, it has to be a must. And it has to be reasonably seamless, right? So it's not that you want to put someone in the bad light just to make the guy feel better. You shouldn't also be doing that. And a lot of times I genuinely believe that candidates actually know, when you go through a process, whether you've had a good round of discussion or you've not, you get to know about it, right? So, and you can reflect upon it. And those candidates who are very open to get the feedback, they typically, I find them more engaging, rather than some people who might have a certain opinion or perspective and they stick to that. That typically doesn't work out well, but then that is their call. That's the way it works out.
How does candidate feedback affect a company's brand and future applications?
This is probably one of the most underrated thing, right? I mean, in terms of how to actually get to engage. And a lot of times, I mean, people in the TA community or, the talent acquisition team or otherwise, or the interviewer from the business side or whoever could be so much caught up in their own uh, work and process and systems that there could be slip at times. So my own suggestion and advice is right from, for the brand reflection of the hiring company. I mean, most important thing would be what is the groundwork you do before you engage with the candidate, right? So, the job descriptions have to be in place. And those are the points where a consulting company like ours, which is advising the client and working with the talent community, needs to play that role, right? Ensure that the job descriptions are there in place. Ensure that the reflection of those job description has gone out to the candidate. Ensure that the day of the interview, the timings are clearly spelled out. Ensure that the coordinating person is clearly clear with the contact details, etc., being there. Give them the perspective in terms of, the location of the interview, etc., and how long could it take. Be there, give them that time in terms of so that they're well prepared when they go down for that interview. So, to a large extent, I feel that is where those advising the talent community is also becomes important. And wherever the client is not able to do that where they are able to come out with all those examples, I think it is imperative that we as a consulting company get to do that job. So one is that, and then the entire candidate experience, and that is where the brand enhancement of the hiring company can take place, right? How were those moment of truth situations? Were they kept, as we talked about, were they kept waiting, were they not kept waiting? How was the discussion? And you know was the interviewer kind of hassled for time or not hassled for time? Did the interviewer really made that effort to understand the person or not understand the person, and the person's experience, etc., and so on and so forth? So that is important. And then the post interview feedback loop closure process, what we talked about earlier in the day. So, in my mind, the way I look at it is people who make the cut, obviously someone will be getting eliminated maybe at the first round, someone at the second round, third, or whatever it is. And typically, all these discussions either could be a panel process or could be a sequential event led process. But more often than not, we also suggest the client that there has to be some time limit to the entire interview process cycle to last. And a lot of times, so candidates do get jittery about it. Why is it taking so much of time, and etc., and so on and so forth, and frequent rescheduling, etc. That doesn't help. So, if you are a company which is hiring senior level talent, mid to senior level talent, and are you really able to give them white glove treatment through the consulting hiring company you're working with, right? The consulting company you're working with. I mean, how good a process gets laid out, that is important. Uh, Companies need to be looked upon. Every individual realizes whether they make the cut, it could be because of them, it could be in spite of them, whatever it could the case be. But uh, you know what is the end of the day, the experience which I take away, right? And so that myself, if I were to interview with the same company 2 years later down the line, would I have a positive image of the company or not, right? So those kind of things becomes important. So if you want to be looked upon as an honest company, as a process oriented company, as a diligent company, as a humane company, if you will, all those articulation, etc., needs to come out in the discussion. All those, the process should reflect that. And then, even if the candidate doesn't make the cut, that if you genuinely get a perspective that you were valued upon, right, and you are valued upon, and maybe this is not the occasion for you to come on board, but future opportunities could still arise. And that communication closure, if it happens in a meaningful manner, I believe it's a wonderful, employer branding exercise per se. And it's a shame that, as I said, my own experience that 25 to 30% of the feedback closure loop happens. But if it can get increased more, uh, definitely it will be good for the hiring company, and of course over a period of time for the talent community as well.
How can candidate feedback improve a company's recruitment strategies?
Feedback as a process from the hiring company standpoint, right? When you try to go out to the talent pool and get a perspective in terms of on the process, systems, etc., how did it pan out for them? That's a very effective way of showing your empathy to the talent that, here we are as a company listening to you. So I think it's a very positive reinforcement image what kind of goes out. So, for the moment, I mean, imagine all the competitive intel, etc., which kind of comes out, right? Which is hardcore knowledge, which comes out in an interview, which I suspect that, the interviews are capturing it, and then, it kind of lays up in their own understanding, knowledge, etc., whatever you want to. So that is one aspect of it, why interviews are so important and the feedback solicitation is so important. Uh, the important part in terms of how did the candidate feel during that round of interview? Did he Was he visibly welcome, not welcome? Those moment of truth engagements with the interviewers or panel of interviewers, and the overall feel and experience that in itself, if it goes out well, that's a very positive reaffirmation of in terms of what as an employer or future employer you would want to stand out for. So recruitment process, see, the way it could potentially get changed at times, I mean, you get a perspective that, okay, while we had been looking at the market for A, B, C, D kind of talent, where, these different skills were important, but what we feel is that that's not the kind of talent one gets to see in the marketplace, and maybe we'll need to tweak that process a bit, right? So my process could change. My ask of the candidate could potentially get changed as a recruitment process, right? Or the that particular mandate process at least. Then, in terms of, if the interview process is lasting too long, there is too much of time which is coming into play. In a lot of junior to mid on the technical side, we see there are certain line of questioning which may not be required for, or the hard skill requirement is of certain technical skill set, but the questioning is more on the other side, etc. So those kind of feedback when you get, then at times you feel that actually, what, my job description might need to undergo a change. So things like that happen. So, as a feedback, it can allow me, related to that particular mandate, do I need to change my process a bit? How do I, get the best talent in the marketplace? The budget we had allocated for the role, is it enough, not enough? Things like that. That all could be built in terms of future hiring, which you're trying to do. Post the candidate feedbacks as they come along. The second is, of course, as I was, so that is one. Two is the brand reflection in terms of how do I want to be perceived in the talent community's mind map. I mean, that is important. And that I believe is genuinely one of the good things which can potentially happen if, as a hiring company, I encourage the talent community to give those feedback to us, right? And third, uh, overall understanding of the competitive marketplace, the market, in terms of be it from a talent standpoint, business standpoint, new opportunity standpoint, etc., there could be a lot of those information which comes out, and how, as a talent acquisition team, typically the feedback gets solicited by the talent acquisition team of the hiring company, that how do I make my process better, right? And how do we potentially become the preferred employer of choice? Things like that, which are larger objectives, you can possibly work towards that quite a bit, assuming the feedback gets collated and analyzed and thought through and stuff like that, right? So there could be objectives which does get solved. So that's the way I look at it. And to that an extent, it's extremely important. I believe, if that 30% can, even if it goes up to 40% or whatever, that could be a significant improvement. And, uh, we totally understand that, again, it is the level where these feedbacks need to come out, right? And a lot of times, even if you don't have as a hiring company, if you don't have the time to engage with the talent community on your own directly, right? Are you open to listen from your consulting partners, who are helping you with your talent acquisition needs? That what are they saying, right? And how do you reflect upon that feedback? That in itself could be helpful. So yeah, so that's where I would leave it. It's a great brand building objective. It could be accomplished. It could be from tactical objective to a larger objective. I guess both these things could get accomplished.
How can you provide honest feedback to rejected candidates while preserving a positive company image?
There are three categories of candidates post an interview. One is someone who clears the interview round. Uh, Second, who doesn't and who's a reject. And third is a lot of times where a company is not so sure of whether the person does make the cut or is just on the fence, right? So kind of typical that on hold category they would call it. And our submission to hiring companies is this that, I mean, what exactly you mean on hold? Is it really genuinely on hold or it is tending more towards rejection and you're just, trying to hedge your bets just in case you don't get anyone better, things like that. And or are there any particular skill set or area where you found the person to be found wanting? And maybe, with a little bit of time, the person can pick up and things like that, and you would still want to take a bet and so on and so forth. So that is the third category where also at times I believe it is important that those on hold candidates, you give them the genuine feedback and then give them a time that before this, next 15 days or 1 month, they will finally take the call. So, in terms of to your question, in terms of honesty, I definitely believe that you have to be honest, authentic, and factual, right? I mean, in terms of you cannot be coming out with very plain Jane statements, inane statements in terms of, let's say, for example, they found that energy to be lacking, or communication skill was probably not the best, right? So these, while they are softer skills, they are difficult to quantify uh, or even for that matter qualify in terms of what exactly would you mean. But then as a consultant, then it becomes my job to talk to the hiring managers or to the talent acquisition team and get the real meaning out of it. I mean, see, communication skills, is it that one-to-one communication the person was found wanting, or do you believe in a group meeting kind of a situation, the person will have difficulty voicing his or her point of view across over there, or that the sentence structuring, etc., and all that, the person was not able to explain the perspective in a very succinct manner or in a good manner or whatever. So if you can get those further segmentation done, it helps your cause, right? So honest feedback has to be empathetic at the same time, as we were talking about earlier, that if you understand where the candidate was coming from, how was he at that particular on that particular day, that particular moment, were there anything in the back of the mind which was coming into play? If you understand all that, then then that contextualizing becomes much more healthy, and you're able to give that feedback to the candidate, right? So definitely, I believe that honest feedback needs to be provided. However, in a constructive feedback manner, if there is a positive outcome outlook could be there, then it becomes important, beneficial for the candidate, at least during the next round of interviews, that person is able to do that. At times, we are faced with a situation where we are not able to do it, right? And then, you also got to be honest that, listen here, I mean, in spite of our best efforts, that we have not been able to get the complete feedback the way we would want it to come out to you, but this is what we have gathered, and we will leave it at that. So, and all depends on the timeline, the availability, how open the candidate is, also things like that. But yeah, I mean, whatever it is, the job needs to be done. As much as honest you can be, please do that. uh, Give them the perspective in terms of whatever you picked up from the client and lay it up from them. And in the same way, in that whatever feedback comes out for the company, hiring company, I mean, you need to give them that feedback, that listen here, I mean, whatever you might have felt, but here is a voice of dissonance which we have heard. You might want to take any action which is an outcome of this feedback, or you may not, but this is something which is there. So, and if it becomes a pattern, then obviously, I'm sure people are intelligent enough to get a sense of it.